doll artist. Kim here from CustomDollBaby.com in my brand new, almost reopened workshop. As some of you may have heard, I've actually been quite a bit under the weather for the last month or so, which has made it very difficult to unpack and get set up and to reopen. So I am still in that transitioning phase. Also still recovering. So if I sound tired, that's what it is. But in any case, I wanted to check in because we're almost done rooting baby Hades. And before he goes home, I wanted to touch base and give a few more of my tips for how to root human hair on your reborn baby doll. When rooting human hair, it's very important to prepare it first with a good moisturizing treatment. Human hair has a tendency to get dry. The moisturizing treatment will help to make it more manageable and also give it more body and shine. For more information on preparing your hair, please check out the video right before this one. So my intention actually was to trim this hair as I went along, and then I got very curious to see what it was going to look like at full length. So this is 10 to 12 inch hair. So I just wanted to see if, this would make a good Rapunzel doll. So it looks very neat at its current length, but Hades is only a 6-month-old and we are going to be trimming this hair. So don't get too alarmed by the way it looks now. The hair that I'm using, and there's more information in the other video, is from B&G. They call this the Baby Soft Yaki texture. It's a blend of human hair. And here is how much I've rooted so far. It's quite a lot. When you're rooting, you use less hair than you would if you're making a wig. So if I were doing a wig for Hades, I would go through this whole pack. But because I'm rooting, I'm able to spread the hair out a little more and give it that baby fine look without it getting too thick and yeah, just too thick and chunky for what would be appropriate on a baby. When rooting human hair, I find it very helpful to have a flat iron handy, preferably one where you can control the temperature. I use this to straighten the rooted edge. I don't straighten the whole strand. You can if you want to, but it isn't really necessary. It's also useful to have either some leave-in conditioner or a squirt bottle of water handy. This is great for fighting static. The hair will have a tendency to get a lot of static in it and get in your way. And then any clips, bows, brushes, typical hair stuff to help you keep the hair off of your working area. So today we're going to be rooting the hairline. Where we want very, very fine hairs. And I'm going to finish up this little bald spot in the side. The approach to rooting these two areas is quite different, so I will demonstrate them both. The first thing I'm going to do before I start is get the hair that I've already rooted out of the way so I'm not getting tangled up in it while I work on the section that I'm rooting. So we've got this little triangle, so I'm just going to brush everything away from it, even if that's going against the direction it was rooted. And you can braid the hair, you can twist the hair. I'm just going to put a barrette on it. But whatever you use, make sure it's something that's not going to rip out the hair. So be careful in that respect. Make a kind of loose ponytail. So I don't want the hair to get caught while I'm rooting. The next thing I'm going to do is warm the head. So what I have here is a cotton sock full of rice, and that rice has been heated in the microwave. And I'm going to pour that inside the head through the base of the neck. And the way I like to do it is actually to shuffle it all to one end, stuff it down into that hole, just the empty sock part, and quite literally pour the rice into the head. That just seems to work better when you have a really large head like this than trying to shove the sock and the rice in simultaneously, because you want it to fill up the inside of the head, because this has two functions. One, it warms the vinyl. Warm vinyl is more elastic. More elastic vinyl makes smaller holes, and it's easier to root. And it's also holding the vinyl taut for you, so you can root a lot faster when the head's not buckling under the force of the needle. So I always want to make sure I have enough rice to fill the whole head. Before we can root the hair, we first have to get it off the weft. So first you need to decide how much hair you want. So you can get a small amount, like say you're going to root a loop, maybe you want to cut off just enough to make your loop. I'm going to be rooting from the end, and I'm actually going to grab a lot because I don't want to have to stop and keep trimming the hair off. And it helps me to loosen my grip. So if you've taken a look at the ergonomics tape, which is really important to check out to avoid repetitive strain while you're rooting, I talk a lot about not holding your hair or your needle too tight. So if I'm holding a pretty big wad of hair, it actually helps me to not hold it too tight, have a looser grip. So really more for the sake of my hands than anything else, I use a pretty big amount of hair. I cut it close to the weft, but I didn't cut it exactly on the weft. If you get really close to the weft, you start to pick up some of the strings and adhesives and stuff like that, and we don't want to root that junk, so I just try not to cut it off. Okay, we'll set the rest of the hair aside. So now I'm gonna brush out the hairs that are short. Just because, I mean, I'm going to cut it anyway, but it's just so much easier to root when your hair is all roughly the same length. So I've wrapped the end of the hair around my finger, so I have a good grip on it because it's loose hair at this point. And I'm just going to take a brush and pull out anything that I wasn't holding. So this is much easier for pulling out tangles. You would never use a brush this stiff on your doll, but when the hair is not attached to anything, it's really good for working out those nits. Okay, so this is the end I'm going to root. It's super uneven, so I'm going to trim it, but before I do that, I'm going to use the flat iron on just my rooted end, so just that last inch or so, to smooth it out a little bit. Because the smoother the hair is, the easier it is to grab. So I just like for it to be as smooth as possible. I'm also going to make sure I cut this thing off because it's only going to sit around and get hotter and hotter while I'm not using it. Okay, and then the last preparation step is to trim this end even. Okay, so this is my ideal rooting edge. It kind of looks like a paintbrush. The hair is smooth, the hair is even, and that's going to make it a lot easier for me to pick out those individual strands. And now we're ready to root the subject. I have here a bowl that I'm rooting in. So I don't use any other rooting pillows or tools. I just have a bowl that I can use to position the head where I want it so that the spot that I'm ready to root is facing up. Now you might be able to see very faint lines here, so these are my guidelines. So these help me to determine the direction that I'm rooting. And there's another video that has a lot more information also on my blog on how to draw your direction lines, your boundary lines, and your hairline. Human hair is a lot thicker than mohair, so you have to be very intentional about the needle that you choose for rooting. So this one is a 42 gauge regular. So as you can see, there are 6 barbs on it, 2 on each side, 3 sides. And this one seems to work well with grabbing human hair and pushing it down into the vinyl. Anything bigger than that, a 43, a 46, it's just not going to grip the hair. And I'll demonstrate that more later because the diameter of the hair follicle is too big. And there's a lot more information about hair follicle diameters and barb depths and which needles you need for what kind of hair in the rooting series. So please check that out as well. Alright, so here we go. We're finally rooting. This hair is blonde, so hopefully you can see it. I'm rooting from the end. I've already smoothed out my end. I've already trimmed my end. And so now I can grab just individual strands of hair and push them down into the vinyl. Lighting is key when you're rooting blonde hair because it can be very difficult to see. So notice I have the barbed edge pointing down, so there's a flat edge facing you and a barbed edge facing down. I'm taking just a few strands of hair, pulling it out of my lock and using the needle to grab that hair and push it in. You don't want to root too shallow, and by too shallow I mean you don't want to grab the hair too close to the tip because you need to have enough of a length of hair inside the head to be glued down. That's how you seal it in place. So don't root too shallow, but don't root too far up the strand either, because if you do, I don't know if I can demonstrate that. So say I root it here, I can't push the whole thing in, so now I've got this little piece of stubble that's sticking out, and that's no fun, so we're not going to do that either. Of course I can't get it out now because I don't know where my tweezers are. Okay, and so we basically keep doing this all around the head, all through the scalp, until we finished rooting his head. Pulling out a few strands, and then individually, one hair at a time, pushing it down into the scalp. And once you get used to it, you can actually roll with this. I mean, I can root pretty quickly when I'm working with human hair. Because it is so much thicker than mohair, I can see it better. And I can just grab it and tap it right on in. So human hair is great once you get the hang of it, but there are some limitations. If you're trying to put it on like an infant or preemie doll, it's not really recommended. So I just finished polishing off that last little bald spot. Now we're ready to work on the hairline. As you may recall from the hair planning video, you have a lot of flexibility in where you place your hairline. You can run it all the way down into the forehead, you can frame the face, or you can pull it back for a more recessed infant-like hairline pattern. So it's really up to you. When I'm working on a portrait doll or creating a doll from a photo, I'll often ask for photos of, with the hair brushed back, or I'll ask, do you have any pictures with the bangs pinned back or the hair back in a ponytail? And I'm sure my customers are thinking, oh, this lady's kind of strange, but that's how I get my hairline. When I'm making a portrait doll, I mimic everything, including the hairline. So it's good to take some time to think about how and where you want to place your hairline and make sure that it's going to be symmetric. And there's more information on drawing out your hairline in the hair planning video. So I'm going to use the same bunch of hair that I cut off at the beginning. And this time I'm going to see how fine I can get it. As I mentioned, there's a variety of hair diameters in this hair, and I want to get the tiniest hairs I can. What I have here is a 43 gauge crown needle, which is very small. I have it in a traditional rooting tool because the base of it is actually too fat for my plastic tools. And I'm just going to see if I can catch anything, because human hair is very thick. Okay. So far, so good. Okay, so you see that? I don't know if you can see that. See if I can zoom you in a little more. So what's happening here is the hair won't catch. So I have a hair, it looks a lot like the other hairs, but it's so fat that the needle isn't dragging it into the vinyl. So I'm gonna have to reject that strand. And that is a good way to basically filter out the thicker hairs from your bunch. See, here's another one that won't go in. Same problem. It's kind of stuck at the hole, it's not going in the hole. So if I wanted to root this hair with the 43, I would be rejecting a lot of strands because they're just not going in. And I'm actually rejecting some strands that I wouldn't mind having, so I'm gonna go up a size. So now I'm gonna try a 42. Still crown. The barbs are arranged a little differently, but it's still a much tinier needle. And now I'm back in business. Okay, so now we've got a strand rejected by the 42. So you see that little piece sticking out? That's because the hair diameter is too fat for the needle to catch. Like even if I try to massage it in, I mean if I do it several times, I can get it through, but it didn't really want to root it. So that is how I'm gonna filter out the strands that are too thick. I didn't mind those in the back of the hair and in the bulk of the hair, but I mind them very much in my hairline. So I'll use the needle to do that work for me. Okay. So again, this is a 42 crown. We rooted the back of the head with a 42 regular. I want these holes as tiny as possible. Then every once in a while, I'll get one that's too fat, or too thick rather, to go in. You can use spacing to your advantage in the hairline. So if you don't want your baby to have, you know, this sort of really thick Burt Reynolds kind of sideburns, you can space your hairs out more. Excuse me. So it looks more fine and more natural. Once you've finished rooting the hairline, you want to give it a good look over to make sure you're happy with where it is on the face. If you want to frame the face more and bring it in further, it's actually not a good idea to pull it out. If you want to move the hairline back, you're kind of stuck with it. You can add to it, but you can't undo it. But just make sure you like where those hairs are and how they lay. So I'm actually very pleased with this side. So now I need to make sure it's symmetric on the other side. So I'm going to pull the hair back, actually pin it back so I can see where I stopped when I was rooting. I want to pull out any rooted hairs, a few stragglers there. Okay. And I'm using a water-soluble pencil. I think this is used for fabric, to make my lines because they wash right off. So what I'm going to do is draw out these lines to match back up with the hair that's already been rooted. Same thing I did on the other side because this gives me the direction of the hair. Even going to extend it a little bit down into the face. That way I know where I'm going. And now I'm going to find the points that align to the other side to give me my boundary of how far I need to root. So I went about to here on the other side. Okay. Comes to about here. So I think this is good. So we're bringing the hairline into the face quite a lot because his face was looking very square before, and I'm trying to make it a little more round. Okay, so we're going to root this side as well, and then he's going to be all set. At least the hairstyle will be all set. Okay, so we finished rooting the hairline on the other side. It's looking nice and fine. Before I take out the rice sock and start allowing the head to cool down, I want to first confirm that my hairline is symmetric and even and properly placed. And that's pretty hard to see when there's the markings on the head, because I don't mark, or I don't root directly on the markings. So I'm actually just going to take a cosmetic wedge that I've moistened with water, and I'm going to wipe off the hairline that I drew, because I want to be able to see the hair and whether I've rooted it symmetrically, which may not necessarily be indicated by whether I drew it symmetrically. If that makes sense. I don't know, it's been a long day, I'm probably not making as much sense. Okay, so this is the water-soluble marking pencil. So it comes right off in water. And the rest of it I'm actually going to shampoo away. This is just so I can see. Okay. So now by pulling the hair back and studying it from different angles, I can confirm that my hairline is even and symmetric. So this is looking really good. So I think we're all set. So now I'm going to carefully take out these bows. Be very cautious when handling the hair because you really don't want to pull any of it out. So I try to make sure that I'm not holding any strands of hair and that there aren't any tangled up in my bow when I'm pulling it out. Which makes bow removal a multi-step process. Okay, there's nothing in the length. So now that we're done rooting, I highly recommend thoroughly inspecting your hair, brushing through it, parting it in different places to ensure that you don't have any bald spots and that you don't have any areas where the hair fell out or was pulled out and you need to go back and reroot that. Just pulling out the sock for now because it's quite heavy and it makes my job a little bit harder. As I mentioned, you know, comb through it, brush through it, part it in different places. Try not to style it too much because we don't want to pull out hair unnecessarily. Make sure there aren't any bald spots. The other thing that you should check is actually inside the head. You can most easily see inside your doll's head when you hold it up to a light source. Since it's nice and sunny outside my window, I'm actually just holding it up to the window. What you're looking for is bald spots. So if you have a section of hair that didn't root properly, you won't see the ends coming through the vinyl. So if you see any spots where there isn't any hair, or any hair ends poking through, then you know you need to go back and reroot that spot because it's just going to pull back out later. So if this were a Rapunzel doll or elf doll or some kind of fantastic character, we would be done. You could just leave the hair nice and long because that's really fun. But this is a reborn baby doll, so we're actually going to be trimming the hair down a lot. I'm not going to keep the length that it is. I just rooted it this length because that's the shortest length of human hair I could purchase, and I was pretty curious to see what it was going to look like, so so that was fun. I've gone through and looked over, parted it in a lot of different places, make sure I don't have any bald spots, make sure that it's going to be easy to style, and it's looking great. So the next step for me will be to root his eyebrows. I'm actually going to root them in mohair rather than human hair because I need them to lay down. Then we're going to seal the hair so that inside the head area that I was showing you, we're actually going to put a strong waterproof adhesive in there to hold down those hair ends so it'll be able to withstand a lot of pulling and brushing and styling. And then we'll be good to go. I hope you enjoyed this human hair rooting demo. If you have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the comments or visit me on my blog at CustomDollBaby.com. If you haven't yet, please subscribe to my channel. We have a lot more rooting demos and videos queued up for the future, and you don't want to miss that. So thank you so much for joining me, and I will see you next time.
Yeah.